One of the questions I get asked the most is, how do I know which colour pencil to use? And honestly, I completely get it. When you're faced with a big set of colours, it can really feel overwhelming not knowing where to begin. In this video, I wanted to show you that it really doesn't matter if your colours are perfect. What matters is the tonal values and the way you layer them. So you can use different colour combinations like I did here, but still achieve a very similar outcome. So for this first dog eye, I'm using colours I'd naturally reach for. I kind of have base tones that I've come to rely on for certain eye colours or fur types, and I'm following the general pencil order I'd usually use too. I'm starting by mapping out the outline of the eye and then gradually building up the tones within it, working from light to dark. I'm using a light pressure to begin with and slowly increasing it as I layer. When it comes to realism, how you layer your pencil is often more important than the exact colours you choose. In the iris, I'm using circular motions to shade in. I like to do this to create a smooth, even blend, and it kind of helps mimic those patterns of detail I can see in the eye. So here I'm just adding a bit more depth and some final little touches to the eye, adding in those shadow details coming down and working into the reflection. I'm really trying to get all those different tones I can see. Even after all these years of drawing, I still like to test out the shades on a scrap bit of paper first and hold it up to the reference photo, just to double check that it matches the colours that I can see. When I'm working on the fur, I always work in the direction the fur grows. This really helps create that natural flow and texture, and it makes a huge difference in how lifelike the final piece looks. Another thing to mention is getting both those warm and cool tones in. It doesn't really matter what order, and most subjects will have a mix of both, but it's important to make sure you're including that variety because it adds that depth and realism to the piece. So right around the eye, I can see that it's got that blue-grey undertone, and then it gradually shifts into those warmer tones as we move out into the fur. So I'm layering on top here, making sure we have that mix of both. Starting to add in those finer details here and refining any areas before we move on to the second eye. Moving on to the second eye, I'm switching up the pencils a bit from what I used in the first one, just to show you how you can still get a really similar result, even if the shades or the order you use them in are slightly different. I feel like over time you get used to picking out those colours and you kind of find a combination that works for you, but I still like to mix things up a little bit now and again. It just shows you that you don't need to get everything bang on. It's totally fine to experiment and just trust your eyes. So here I'm doing some colour swatches of the different ready tones. I think for the last dog eye I used the Polychromos Sanguine and the Burnt Sienna, but this time I've gone with the Indian Red, and I'm blending that out using some vibrant warm shades. Around the pupil I'm using a sepia tone as it's got that warm brown grey tone to it. For the last dog eye I think we used more of a mix of tones to achieve that same colour. Still using my go-to black and white pencils to add depth and highlights to the eye. And then for that blue-grey area right around the eye, I completely switched it up here and went straight in with a blue pencil, and then I toned it down with a darker slate grey layered over the top. For the fur, I still worked from light to dark, but I went in with some peach and olive tones first before going in with more of the earthy warm brown tones. And as you'll see towards the end, it all ties together and looks very similar to the other dog eye. Here I'm using the Luminance Dark Flesh, which isn't a pencil I reach for very often, but it's worked really well as that transition shade going into the fur. And then for some of the richer areas, I've used the Polychromos Terracotta. It's a little more vibrant than the brown orange I used for the first eye, and I've used the Indian Red, which we use for the eye, to deepen those warm reddy tones in the fur. Again, I'm just refining everything and adding in those finer details. So as you can see, the final result has turned out very similar. Hopefully this video has shown you that it's less about picking the perfect colour and more about trusting your eye and process. If you'd like to watch the full real-time tutorial, you can find it over on my Patreon. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.